Hello and welcome to the Testing Security Required Training for all testing personnel. My name is Carol Jenkins and I have the privilege of working as a team member with your principal, your school's test coordinator, and with the testing office team as their senior director. I have prepared this video for you in order to comply with the state requirement that testing security procedures must be discussed prior to each state-required assessment throughout the school year. Hopefully this video will be used at your school to help facilitate that training process. It is our responsibility as a team to provide a secure and standardized testing experience for each and every one of our students here in Wake County, no matter what job you have, which test you are administering, or whether you are a volunteer in some capacity. Each of us plays a vital role in helping to maintain a secure testing environment in all of our schools. Because we are required by the State Board of Education to provide this training, our objectives are pretty much spelled out for us. By the end of this video, and at the end of your subsequent discussions regarding test security and the Testing Code of Ethics during your trainings, we expect that you'll be familiar with the North Carolina Testing Security Protocol and Procedures Manual. You'll be familiar with the North Carolina Testing Code of Ethics and know where you can go to find them. Have an understanding of the security requirements for administering the assessment for which you are being trained. Understand your role and your responsibilities associated with ensuring that a secure and standardized testing environment has been provided for all of your students, and have signed or initialed your test security agreement form or forms. If you are serving as a test administrator and a proctor, you will need to sign or initial both forms. You are required to review this video twice a year during each school year. The first viewing will occur just prior to your first test administration for the school year, whatever that test administration might be. The second viewing will occur in the spring during your trainings for end-of-year testing. For assessments that fall in between these two viewings, your test coordinator is required to facilitate discussion in your trainings that specifically address testing security, the Testing Code of Ethics, and provide you with a refresher of your ethical responsibilities. You should have a printout of this PowerPoint presentation. You're encouraged to take notes and write some reminders for yourself. At the end of your first viewing of this video, you will be required to read and sign the Test Security Agreement form indicating that you understand the requirements associated with your responsibilities for testing and that you agree to keep all testing information secure and confidential. Even if you have viewed the video in previous years, each year you must view the video again and sign a new Test Security Agreement form for that school year. For subsequent trainings during the school year, your test coordinator will go over the Testing Code of Ethics with you and then will provide you with your previously signed Test Security Agreement form. After your training, you are required to read over the agreement once again and then write your initials and the date under your original signature. This will occur each time you are trained for one of the state-required assessments for the duration of the school year. You must sign a Test Security Agreement form for each position that you will hold during the school year, whether it's test coordinator, test administrator, proctor, or voluntary proctor. DPI's manual, Testing Security Protocol and Procedures for School Personnel, serves as the basis for the information covered in this training, which includes the Testing Code of Ethics. The most current version of the manual can always be found on DPI's website as noted in the slide. There are numerous legal and policy requirements that govern the state's testing program as noted in this slide. This particular provision codifies the copying, reproducing, or paraphrasing restrictions. It is important that you take note of the provisions highlighted in this slide and understand the gravity of these words. For teachers, this policy, along with all the provisions of the Testing Code of Ethics, directly align with Standard 1E of your teacher evaluation form, which addresses your ethical obligations. Failure to comply with the Testing Code of Ethics, as outlined in these slides, could not only create irregularities for your school, but could also be reflected in the appropriate sections of your performance evaluations. You will find that everything we do must be grounded in the North Carolina Testing Code of Ethics, which can be found in numerous places for your reference. Although you will see the Code of Ethics in your assignment guides and proctor guides, you are not permitted to remove them from the guides. If you don't have one of the guides available, please ask your test coordinator for a copy of the Testing Code of Ethics or go to the links on the slides. To further emphasize the importance of the North Carolina Testing Code of Ethics, please remember that they must be reviewed prior to each test administration, regardless of the type of assessment. The code applies to all facets of test preparation, administrations, and material management and must be followed. The code also emphasizes the need to maintain proper test security at all times and prohibits any and all discussion of test forms or test items. This limitation extends to your PLTs in the faculty room, the parking lots at home, and other venues. While it is permissible and encouraged for you to discuss student data and student results as part of your PLT meetings or with your MTSS coaches, the line is drawn when it comes to discussing actual test items and forms of the test. If I sound like I'm repeating myself, I am. In several locations of the Testing Code of Ethics, your assessment guides, and policies, you will find the reminder that no test can be reproduced in any manner and that test items may not be discussed. Test security also means that school and curriculum personnel are prohibited from using excerpts from the tests at any time as part of instruction or as resource materials. As one example, this means that a proctor or a test administrator walking around the room during testing may not glance at the students' test books or computers, remember the questions or answers, and then write them down to be used later for instruction. You remark, "Never in my school." Well, guess what? This has already been done by some of your peers, so it is important that we emphasize how this applies to your situation. Now take a moment to think about how this might impact the way you perform your job as a test coordinator, a test administrator, a proctor, or in some other capacity where you are supporting testing in your school. When doing so, think about what you are able to do or not able to do as you supervise a standardized assessment. You may place this presentation on pause while you discuss this within your groups. You all know this, but it is important to remind you. In accordance with FERPA, all student test scores are considered confidential information and must be protected. You may not disseminate individual student results to the public or employees except as permitted by FERPA. As part of FERPA, it naturally follows that it is your obligation to protect the confidentiality of individual student test results. To do so, please ensure that you do not post test results on bulletin boards or display cases, or announce the score results over the school intercom. Yes, this has also happened. This applies to wonderful results as well as results that may not have met proficiency standards. Some things you may want to think about when discussing student test results include not discussing individual student results with other students, volunteers, parents, or visitors, and being sensitive to whomever might be within earshot when you are discussing the student's results with the student or with her parents or guardians. Now, some of your colleagues seem to have struggled with understanding the difference between a secure test and a released test, and have made some life-changing errors as a result. There's a big difference. As a rule of thumb, any test that is administered during the state-designated testing window is considered a secure test. In most cases, if you see a form number or code in the upper right-hand corner of the test booklet, that test is still considered secure. In contrast, release tests are clearly identified, even by just looking at the cover, where you will see the words, quote, "released form," stamped across it and on the test pages. At no time will a current test be released by DPI or the testing office while we are still in the testing window. It usually takes a while for DPI to announce that a test has been released or to post it on their website. If you're not sure if something is released, please contact your test coordinator or your principal. This is an example of the cover of a test that was once secure and is now released. Note that there is a box in the upper right-hand corner with the words Released Form printed. This replaces the secure form code that used to be there. Although you may not be able to see it on this slide, the words Released is also typed across the state of North Carolina and is quite visible to the naked eye. When using sample test items, you must make sure that they have been released. But this does not include any test items that teachers create themselves for use in individual classrooms, any ancillary materials that are provided by your textbook publishers, any vendor items such as Case 21, Discovery Ed, or M-Class, or any items that are marked released by DPI. Testing windows are established by the legislature, the State Board of Education, and NCDPI. Once the testing office receives the draft testing window calendar from DPI, the windows are then applied to the testing by the testing office team to each type of school calendar, of which there are several. The drafts are sent to the schools and posted on our website and now on our wiki as well. However, due to certain restrictions on various programs, scoring, and data deadlines that have to be met, the requirement to meet a set number of instructional days and unforeseen weather events, it is likely that the testing calendars that we produce initially will need some variations, which you will find by the end of the school year. The school test coordinator and principal typically work together to establish the testing calendar for your school within the designated testing window. Failure to test within the prescribed testing window could lead to a testing irregularity. DPI spells out in each administration guide for each assessment the students who are eligible. In general and at a minimum, you can count on DPI insisting that all students be tested in grades 3 through 8 and in high school courses for which an EOC is administered. This, however, may vary with the type of assessment being administered or the particular legislation that is currently in place for other types of programs that are being implemented. Eligible students include those students with accommodations and those who have been identified with disabilities or as limited English proficient. Please remember, all testing accommodations must be documented on the ROA form or transitory medical condition form and provided to the eligible student on their test day or days in accordance with the written documentation. We are now experiencing a push to move towards more online testing. If your school is testing online, as with paper pencil secure test administrations, online test administrations also require secure processes. The testing information on the computer screen is protected and secure, and all school or testing personnel must follow the rules and procedures associated with secure online administrations. These are typically discussed by your test coordinator during your required trainings. When it comes to accounting for and storing our secure test materials, we all have different responsibilities. Those assignments for the various roles may change according to the type of test being administered and at the principal's discretion. You may also end up being trained to perform more than one role. Therefore, it is important to understand how responsibilities are shared within each of our roles. In general, your school principal is responsible for all facets of testing and for maintaining test security at your school. Within the context of the principal, he or she has the responsibility of selecting a school test coordinator to carry out the necessary processes associated with testing. The principal also has the ability to assign others to serve as test coordinators as other assessments come up and are necessary. Whether you are serving as the designated school test coordinator or the test coordinator assigned to a particular assessment, it is your responsibility to promote, train, and maintain all test security and accountability of test materials at all times. You must keep accurate records of where the test materials are, to whom they've been assigned, etc. And you must accurately count test materials as shown on this slide. As a reminder to test coordinators to maintain test security, test materials are only permitted to be transported between the school and the testing office. There are no allowances made for taking secure test materials to other locations en route, to leave them in your car, or to take them to any other destination. If your school principal designates someone other than the school test coordinator to serve as a test coordinator for a particular assessment, then that person is responsible for all facets of testing, to include but not be limited to providing approved storage for the test materials, finding test administrators and proctors if necessary, and training all personnel who will be involved with the test administrations. This primarily applies to Access, where the ESL teacher is typically designated to serve as the test coordinator, or to COGAT in Iowa, where the AIG teacher is sometimes designated to serve in this capacity. Specific training for these responsibilities are provided to the test coordinators by the testing office. In the case of the ESL teacher serving as the test administrator and test coordinator, it is very likely that you will have to wear two hats due to your familiarity with the subject and your oversight of the ESL classes. In this situation, you wear the coordinator hat as well as the test administrator hat. It is still your responsibility to have proctors lined up and trained for their specific portions of the Access assessment. If you have not trained your proctors in advance of testing, they cannot serve as proctors, and you have created a testing irregularity. Test administrators also bear a lot of responsibility when accounting for secure test materials, and must count the test materials several times from the time they pick up the test materials from the test coordinator until they are returned to the test coordinator. The test administrator is responsible for reporting any discrepancies in the count immediately. When the test materials are counted at the end of the test administration and before the students have been dismissed from the classroom, the numbers should match the number of test materials that the test administrator received prior to the start of the test. If they do not, then the test administrator must conduct a search of the classroom and notify the test coordinator or principal immediately. Proctors also bear a responsibility. A proctor must monitor to ensure that the test administrator counts the test materials after they've been distributed to the students and after collecting the test materials from all the students, but prior to the students or the test administrator leaving the classroom. Unless otherwise specified, all test materials are considered secure. In this case, the assessment guide is no longer secure and must be provided to test administrator on days prior to receiving the test administrator training. Test administrators are expected to read the assessment guides prior to attending the training and then be prepared to ask questions during the training. Proctor guides must be provided to each person serving as a proctor, whether a staff member or a volunteer. Proctors are not only expected to attend proctor training, but must also read the proctor guide thoroughly in preparation for testing. In addition, all personnel must receive a copy of the Testing Code of Ethics and be able to read and understand the provisions included therein. If you are serving as both a test administrator and a proctor at some point during any testing window or during the school year, you must be trained for both positions and sign the test security agreement form for each position. Please remember, when you are serving in a position, you are responsible for the duties assigned to that particular position. If you are serving as the designated test coordinator for a particular assessment, such as Access, COGAT, or Iowa, then you must also sign the test coordinator test security agreement form. The bottom line is that all personnel, whether employees or volunteers, must be provided with a copy of the Testing Code of Ethics, must abide by them, and must be trained on them. Prior to distributing test materials to the test administrators, the designated test coordinator is responsible for communicating the process that you will need to follow regarding distribution, counting, and collection of test materials, as well as how to contact the test coordinator in the event of an emergency. While the test materials are signed out to the test administrators remain responsible for all the test materials in their care. Please remember that proctors are not to be left alone with student test books or state test administration materials, and that proctors may not pick up or return test materials from or to the test coordinator unless the proctor is accompanied by appropriate school personnel. When you walk into a classroom before a test administration, please make sure nothing is on the students' desks and that no materials have been placed there in advance of the test. Test materials cannot be handed out until all students are in their seats and the test administrator is about to begin the testing process, which includes handing out the test materials and then reading the directions to the test. Test administrators are reminded that only additional materials students are allowed to have are extra scrap paper, graph paper, or pencils, or any other approved ancillary materials. All of us, from the district level to the school level, are responsible for ensuring that test materials are securely stored, that no one makes a copy of the tests, and that none of our colleagues are discussing the content of the tests or any specific items contained in the test. Whether it's the secure testing room or wherever the test coordinator is located, in order to distribute test materials on the day of the test administrations, every effort must be made to minimize access to the secure state tests. This includes all school system employees and volunteers. Please remember, only the principal and the test coordinator are permitted to have a key to the secure storage area. There are very strong rules in place regarding items that are prohibited in the testing room. Electronic devices are prohibited unless they are being used for the purpose of taking the test, such as tablets, iPads, laptops, or calculators. Cell phones or any other non-approved devices are prohibited during the test and including during the breaks. This applies to all testing personnel as well. Turn your cell phones off and put them away. You may not text or use the cell phone during testing, including the breaks. If a student is observed with a cell phone, electronic device during testing time, the student must be dismissed and the test coordinator will need to enter the irregularity into OTIS. Other prohibited items include personal belongings of the students. Please make sure that any student's personal belongings are put away and inaccessible to the students at all times. This is a biggie. Students cannot access their belongings, which includes the breaks. DPI currently requires that students shall be given an opportunity to read when they have completed testing prior to the completion of estimated time limits. Schools are given the leeway to decide the type of reading material that will be permitted when a student has completed testing. However, before a student can begin to read, the test administrator must ensure that the student acknowledges that he or she has completed the test, collect that student's test materials, and remove them from the student's desk or table. Food and drink continue to be prohibited from the testing room during testing. This includes staff. The only exception is for approved medical reasons, but the test coordinator will need to know in advance if that needs to be the case. Other items prohibited are listed above and include anything the students might bring into the testing room with them. One exception, however, would be the allowance of a language dictionary if this is an approved written accommodation for a student. The test coordinator would need to be informed in advance if this is the case, and it is something that would need to be documented on the student's ROA form. When considering which classrooms to use for testing, the principal and test coordinator need to take into consideration the testing environment and atmosphere that the room provides. There must be no distractions or disruptions. It is recommended that signs be placed on doors and hallways be set up as quiet zones in order to enable a quiet testing environment for the students. As much as possible, you may wish to consider assigning students to seats and ensuring that there is enough space between them to discourage any sharing of responses, whether those are occurring intentionally or unintentionally.
During the test administration, neither the test administrator nor the proctor can leave the students or any student unattended for any period of time. Both must remain in the testing room. If one of the adults gets sick or has an emergency, The test coordinator must be notified and a replacement brought to the classroom to cover for the absent test administrator or proctor during the time that that person must be absent. This is one reason why it is so important to know how to contact your test coordinator in the event someone must leave the room. Throughout the test administration, the test administrator and proctor must remain attentive and vigilant. They must walk frequently and quietly through the room, only briefly scanning student work areas to make sure the students are in the correct areas following directions. Please remember, the test administrators and proctors are there for the sole purpose of supervising the test administration. This is not the time to grade papers, respond to text messages, read a novel or magazine, take a nap, water your plants, or clean out your file cabinets and desk. And yes, all of these activities have occurred during test administrations here in Wake County. The key phrase for a test administration is constant vigilance. If the test administrator or proctor needs to sit down during the administration, they may do so, so long as they maintain an unobstructed view of the students and have easy access to them. Please remember, you are not permitted to assist students with their responses, nor are you allowed to read the test questions, unless, of course, this is a read aloud. Test administrators are especially reminded that you must read the directions and say statements verbatim, and you are not allowed to skip directions or paraphrase anything you are directed to read to the students. After the tests are over, all test materials must be in the possession of the designated test coordinator for that assessment. At that time, if additional bubbling is required, the test coordinator will organize secure groups of 3 or more to code information on the student answer sheets. This would be according to the directions in the assessment guides. Please be very careful when coding this information. Pay attention to columns and lines. Make sure that all the required information is provided. If this is not done, your test coordinators are held up when the answer sheets are scanned and errors start popping up. This creates a delay in the release of your test scores, and it doesn't make your test coordinator or principal very happy either. Online administrations also have required information that must be completed online by testing staff following the test administration. The student responses will actually be scored by a hosted server, but if the required information is not entered, the student's responses may not be accepted for scoring.
We are all required to provide a secure and standardized test administration to all of our students. For test results to be valid, all procedures must be followed across the state. When it comes to providing testing accommodations, testing administrators must ensure that those students who are entitled to testing accommodations receive them appropriately and that all procedures are followed when administering the assessments. Everyone must be trained by the designated testing coordinator prior to each test administration on that particular assessment. This includes Access, COGAT, and Iowa. Whomever is designated to serve as the test coordinator for any particular assessment is responsible for ensuring that all testing procedures are followed and for providing training to the appropriate testing personnel. If a test administrator or proctor misses the training session, then they must attend a makeup session before they can participate in testing. No one can serve as a test administrator or proctor unless she or he has been trained first. If this occurs, the student's test may be declared invalid and a misadministration declared. This would force the student to take the test again in a secure setting with the appropriately trained personnel present. If you observe a testing violation or irregularity, you are responsible for reporting that information to the test coordinator or the principal on the day of the occurrence. If you observe something and you don't report it, that is just as much of a violation of the testing code of ethics as the irregularity itself. DPI has grouped testing irregularities into various categories in order to assist with the classification of irregularities and misadministrations. Under eligibility, you have an irregularity if a student has not been tested that should have been, or if a student has been tested who should not have been. You have to be very careful when identifying the students who should be tested. With accommodations, DPI is also very clear about what is allowed and what is not. If an approved accommodation was not provided or was not provided appropriately, we have a problem. If a testing accommodation was provided to a student, but the accommodation was not approved or documented, we have a bigger problem. Bigger still, if a test administrator provides a read-aloud accommodation during one of the tests for which read-alouds are not permitted, it's time to brace yourselves. In each of these scenarios, we may have to declare a misadministration, which means the student will need to take the test again under the appropriate conditions. Please be careful and don't put your students in this predicament. Security issues focus primarily on testing materials and include the location and appropriate reproduction and who has access to those materials and when. On the other hand, procedural issues involve some type of action that the test administrator or proctor actually engaged in during the test or did to a test, such as altering student responses on an answer sheet or giving improper assistance. If it is obvious or suspected that the test administrator omitted, revised, interpreted, explained, or paraphrased test directions or item choices, then this must be reported to the test coordinator or principal as soon as possible. Monitoring issues pertain primarily to test administrator and proctor actions that create an irregularity, such as the examples given in this slide. Some key points to remember. Students and/or proctors cannot be left alone with test materials. If a proctor is required for an assessment, the proctor must be present in the room before the test administrator starts the test. Students are prohibited from taking test materials out of the testing area. When an irregularity is reported and it is apparent that we do not have a valid score for the student or students, we are required to declare a misadministration. In these situations, a student, students, or a class may be required to take another administration of the test with another form. It is also likely that this will flag an investigation by DPI. Trust me, this is not a road you want to go down. Please don't think that providing a little assistance to students will help them. In the long run, it actually ends up hurting them, and you in the process. If a misadministration is caused by a staff member's actions or inactions, it is very likely this will also be treated as a personnel issue and may result in an investigation with HR involved. It is important that we all bear in mind the importance of ensuring that testing and accountability data are kept secure. Be mindful of how you are sharing confidential testing data with others. Using emails, Google Docs, or other unsecure sites are not acceptable. You will now be provided with an agreement form that you must read and sign following this test security training. There is a form for each type of responsibility: test coordinator, test administrator, proctor, and volunteer proctor. Please take a moment to read and sign the appropriate agreements now. If you are wearing multiple hats, as indicated earlier, make sure you read and sign the appropriate forms for each position. Now that we've come to the end of this training, let's make sure the objectives for the training have been met. On your PowerPoint handout, please place a check in the box next to each objective if the statement is true. If you still have questions pertaining to any of the items we have covered, please make a note of your questions on your handout and discuss your questions with your test coordinator for clarification. This concludes the test security training. Please make sure you leave your signed test security agreement form with your designated school test coordinator. Thank you for all you do for all of our students each and every day. We hope that you have a very smooth and irregularity-free testing season.